Story number 1, Backup Restore. I arrived at the Cascade County Clerk's office on the morning of March 11th, 2024, assigned to supervise the digitization of land deed records dating back to 1873 as part of a federally mandated archival conversion. The building was a 2-story brick structure on the edge of town, and the records room occupied most of the basement. I had been briefed that the project was behind schedule due to contractor turnover, but this was not unusual in rural assignments where local staff sometimes resisted outside involvement. The clerk, a woman in her 60s named Mrs. Holloway, met me at the side entrance and led me down a narrow stairwell. She explained that 3 previous contractors had abandoned the project without explanation, leaving equipment behind in various states of disrepair. I attributed this to the tedious nature of the work and the isolation of the location. The basement was climate-controlled but poorly lit, with rows of metal shelving holding deed books bound in cracked leather. Mrs. Holloway showed me the scanning station that had been set up near the back wall, then returned upstairs to her regular duties. I began standard scanning procedures, working chronologically from the earliest records. The deeds from the 1870s and 80s were fragile but legible, and the digitization proceeded without incident. I maintained a log of each document, noting condition and any preservation concerns. By the end of the first day, I had processed 217 pages. On the second day, I noticed that certain deeds from 1889 through 1892 would not scan correctly. The physical documents appeared normal under examination. Standard legal descriptions of property transfers, handwritten in iron gall ink, with county seal impressions that matched the period. However, the digital files displayed text that did not match the physical documents. The scans showed names and property descriptions that were not present on the page. I assumed this was a calibration error or a problem with the optical character recognition software. I attempted to rescan using different equipment and lighting conditions, but the discrepancy remained consistent. The same 23 documents produced identical corrupted outputs, always substituting the same unfamiliar names. The names were unusual: Carver, Drummond, Lyle, Petrie, and others I did not recognize from the surrounding records. The property descriptions in the corrupted scans referenced section numbers that did not align with the standard township grid. I brought the issue to Mrs. Holloway late that afternoon. She examined the physical deeds and the scans side by side, and her expression changed in a way I did not immediately understand. She became visibly distressed and insisted those names had never appeared in the county records. She said she had worked in the office for 31 years and knew the deed books thoroughly. Then she left early, claiming illness, and I was alone in the basement archive. I continued working until after 6 in the evening, attempting to isolate the technical fault. I rescanned adjacent documents from the same period, and those processed correctly. Only the 23 specific deeds produced the anomalous output. I made copies of both the physical pages and the corrupted scans for my report. That evening, I discovered that the names appearing in the corrupted scans matched entries in a separate ledger stored in an unmarked box on the lowest shelf in the far corner of the room. The box had not been included in the inventory I was given. The ledger was smaller than the official deed books, bound in plain cloth, with no title or date on the cover. Inside were handwritten entries documenting land claims in the same date range as the problematic deeds. The entries used the same names that appeared in the corrupted scans. Each entry included a property description, a claimant name, and a notation in the margin that read, "Held pending verification," or "Claim suspended." The ledger appeared to document land claims that were never officially filed or recognized. There were no county seals, no witness signatures, no transfer records. It was as though someone had maintained a parallel record system for transactions that did not legally occur. I photographed several pages for reference and returned the ledger to the box. When I returned the following morning, Mrs. Holloway was not present. The county supervisor, a man named Rachert, met me in the basement and informed me she had resigned effective immediately due to personal reasons. He instructed me to complete only the pre-1889 records and leave the later documents unfiled. He said the county would handle the remaining materials internally and that my contract would be considered fulfilled once I submitted the partial archive. He did not ask about the scanning errors, and I did not volunteer the information. I followed the instruction and completed the digitization of all records prior to 1889 by March 15th. I prepared the files for transfer to the State Archive system and compiled my internal report. In the report, I noted only that certain records were excluded due to preservation concerns requiring specialist assessment. I did not mention the corrupted scans or the unmarked ledger. I submitted my work on March 16th. The county supervisor signed off on the partial delivery without question. He thanked me for completing the project efficiently and said the county appreciated my professionalism. I was reassigned to a municipal project in Billings 4 days ahead of schedule. The reassignment memo made no reference to incomplete work or outstanding issues. The unmarked ledger was not mentioned in my final documentation, and I did not ask what became of it. My photographs of the ledger pages were stored in a separate file that I did not include in the official submission. The file remains in my personal records, labeled as reference material for potential future clarification. The Cascade County project was closed in my system on March 20th, 2024, with a completion status of satisfactory. Story number 2, Sensor Drift. I arrived at Station 47 for quarterly calibration at 1400 hours on a Tuesday in late September. The drive out took longer than I expected. The industrial corridor outside Gary had been mostly abandoned for years, and the access road was in poor condition. Station 47 was one of 6 automated air quality monitors I maintained in the region under contract with the EPA. Standard work. I expected to finish by 1700 hours. The station sat on a concrete pad about 30 yards from the nearest structure, an old processing facility with boarded windows. I parked beside the chain link enclosure and unlocked the equipment housing. The first thing I noticed was the particulate sensor reading, 300% above baseline. I checked the sky, clear, no wind. I pulled up the regional activity log on my tablet. No industrial operations within 12 miles. No controlled burns. No traffic to speak of. I assumed sensor drift or contamination. It happens. Dust gets into the intake, or moisture corrodes a connection. I ran the diagnostic sequence and got back clean results on all internal checks. The reading held steady. I followed calibration protocol. I opened the intake manifold to inspect the filter membrane. The filter was clean. No dust, no residue, no discoloration. But when I touched it to check the seal, it was cold, noticeably cold. I pulled my hand back and checked the ambient temperature reading. 21 degrees Celsius, normal for late September. I touched the filter again. Cold enough that I could feel it through my glove. I moved to the backup sensor in the secondary housing. Independent system, separate intake, different manufacturer. Same elevated reading. Identical, actually. 304% above baseline on both units. I cross-referenced with the regional network. All stations within a 15-mile radius showed normal air quality. Station 47 was the outlier. At 15:30 hours, I was logging the discrepancy when the data logger flagged an error. The intake port thermometer was recording negative temperature values. -8 degrees Celsius. Then -12. The external thermometer still read 21. I walked outside and put my hand near the intake vent. Warm air, same as ambient. I went back inside. -17 degrees on the internal sensor. That should not have been possible. The intake port was a straight tube with no refrigeration, no cooling mechanism, no reason to deviate from external temperature. And both thermometers were independent units. I checked the wiring. Secure. I checked the calibration history. Both sensors had passed certification in June. I called my supervisor. I explained the situation. Elevated particulate readings with no source, temperature inversion inside a passive intake system, multiple independent sensors reporting impossible data. He asked if I had checked for equipment failure. I told him I had. He asked if there was any visible damage. I told him no. He was quiet for a moment, then told me to document everything and stand by. While I was on the phone, I noticed condensation forming inside the sealed intake chamber. Small droplets at first, appearing on the interior walls. I stepped closer. The droplets were spreading, but not randomly. They formed lines. Straight lines, branching at right angles, spreading across the interior surface in a grid pattern. I watched it happen. The condensation moved against gravity, crawling upward along the walls, dividing and subdividing into smaller channels. I told my supervisor what I was seeing. He asked me to repeat it. I did. He told me to initiate shutdown protocol immediately and secure the station. I followed procedure. I accessed the control interface and triggered the shutdown sequence. The system acknowledged the command. The status indicators switched to standby mode. But the data logger kept running. I could see new entries populating the log file. Temperature readings, particulate counts, timestamps, all still recording. I disconnected the primary power supply. The logger continued. I opened the backup battery compartment and removed the battery. The screen stayed lit. The log kept updating. I took photographs. The intake chamber with the geometric condensation patterns. The data logger screen showing active recording with no power source. The temperature readings dropping into the -30s. I sealed the equipment housing and locked the enclosure. My supervisor told me to leave the site and return to the office. I departed at 1600 hours. The drive back was uneventful. I filed my report that evening. Equipment malfunction across multiple independent systems, cause unknown, specialist evaluation required. I attached the photographs and the data logs I had downloaded before leaving the site. My supervisor called me at 1900 hours. He told me that Station 47 had been decommissioned. He said the infrastructure was too old to justify repair costs and that the station would be removed from the monitoring network. He said my report would be filed under equipment malfunction and that no further action was required. He thanked me for following protocol. I asked about the specialist team. He said it would not be necessary. I asked about the data anomalies. He said they were consistent with cascading sensor failure in aging equipment. I did not argue. The following week, I received my updated service assignments. 6 stations, all in the Southern District. None in the Industrial Corridor. I have maintained the new route for 8 months now. I have not been back to Station 47. I do not know if it was physically removed, or if it still sits on that concrete pad. The station no longer appears in the regional network directory. My report was archived under routine equipment decommission. The photographs I submitted were not included in the final file. Story number 3, Motion Alert. I arrived at Westfield Commons Mall at 9:30 in the evening to assess structural damage reported by the property management company before the scheduled demolition review. The building had been closed for 18 months following the anchor tenant departures and subsequent lease defaults. My assignment was straightforward: document any hazards that might complicate the demolition timeline and confirm the security system deactivation. The security office still had power and 4 functioning cameras covering the main concourse, north wing, food court, and loading dock. The property management company had maintained minimal electrical service to prevent liability issues with break-ins or weather damage. I noted this in my initial log at 9:42. The monitors displayed empty corridors with emergency lighting casting long shadows across the tile floors. At 10:15, I noticed movement on the north wing feed. A figure walked past the shuttered storefronts in a steady, measured pace. The gait was unremarkable. The clothing appeared dark, possibly a jacket and pants, though the camera resolution made details difficult to confirm. I assumed it was a security contractor I had not been informed about, though no vehicles were present in the lot besides my own. I reviewed the footage from the previous 6 hours using the system's playback function. The same figure had walked the identical route 47 times without variation. Each pass took exactly 4 minutes and 18 seconds. The figure entered frame at the north wing entrance, near the old Sears connector, walked the length of the corridor past 23 vacant storefronts, and exited frame at the service hallway junction. Then the loop repeated. I attempted to locate the individual using the concourse camera angles, but the figure never appeared in any adjacent zone. The north wing connected directly to the main concourse. There was no alternative route. I checked the loading dock feed and the food court feed. Both showed empty spaces. I returned to the north wing monitor and watched the figure complete another pass. At 10:53, I used my radio to contact the property management emergency line. The automated system informed me that no other personnel were scheduled on site. I left a message requesting confirmation of any security patrols and continued my observation. At 11:05, the figure stopped mid-stride in front of the former Gap location and remained motionless for 12 minutes. I watched the timestamp advance on the monitor. The figure did not shift position. The posture suggested standing, not collapse or injury. I could not determine if the figure was facing toward or away from the camera due to the angle and lighting. I made the decision to enter the north wing to make contact, following protocol for potential squatter removal. I took my flashlight, radio, and a handheld monitor that could receive the camera feeds. The air inside the mall smelled of stale ventilation and cleaning chemicals. My footsteps echoed in the concourse. The north wing entrance was propped open with a fire door wedge, which I had not placed there. I entered the corridor and proceeded toward the Gap location, checking the handheld monitor as I walked. The figure remained visible on screen, still motionless in the same position. I estimated I was 30 feet from the location. When I reached the storefront, no one was there. The gate was pulled down and locked. The floor was undisturbed. I scanned the corridor in both directions with my flashlight and saw no one. I checked the monitor again. The figure was still on screen, standing in the exact spot where I was standing. I returned to the security office. The walk took 4 minutes. I did not run. When I entered the office and looked at the main monitor array, all 4 feeds showed the figure standing in different locations simultaneously. North Wing, main concourse, food court, loading dock, each one facing the camera. The posture and clothing appeared identical in each feed. I activated the playback function on the main concourse feed. The figure had not walked into frame. It had simply appeared at 11:26, facing the camera. I checked the other feeds. The same timestamp, simultaneous appearance. I shut down the system using the master control panel. The monitors went dark. I unplugged the recording unit and removed the hard drive, placing it in my equipment bag. I sealed the security office and exited the building through the main entrance, confirming all doors were locked behind me. In my vehicle, I drafted the initial report and marked it for routing to my supervisor with a flag for technical review. I noted the camera malfunction and recommended immediate demolition due to structural instability affecting electrical systems. I did not mention the figure in the written report. I included the hard drive in my evidence bag and logged it according to standard procedure. My supervisor called me at 7:15 the following morning. He asked if I had reviewed the footage before removing the drive. I told him I had observed a malfunction that produced looping artifacts and visual duplication across multiple feeds. He asked if I had entered the building beyond the security office. I confirmed that I had walked the north wing to verify the malfunction. He thanked me and ended the call. 3 days later, I received an email instructing me to transfer the hard drive to a courier service with a case number I did not recognize. I complied. The demolition was scheduled for expedited review, and the property was demolished 3 weeks later under emergency authorization due to structural failure risk. The footage was transferred to archives with no viewing authorization. My report was reclassified from standard assessment to technical incident and moved to restricted access. I was assigned to a different region the following month. The case file was closed with no additional follow-up required.